Bueno, buenos días a todos y a todas. Espero que hayáis descansado y después del intenso día de ayer, porque algunos ya habían empezado por la mañana con las redes y el trabajo ayer de la ponencia de Javier Zaragoza y luego todo lo que hicimos de buenas prácticas, pues bueno, ha sido el aperitivo para lo que viene hoy y la primera parte de la mañana. Tenemos una mesa configurada por 4 personas expertas en la siguiente solución o apartando soluciones desde la formación del profesorado. Os presento, así por orden, Juan Gregorio Fernández, Luismi García, Catrien de Koch y Javier García Cazorla. Vamos a debatir sobre las singularidades que tiene la formación del profesorado para optimizar todos los aspectos relacionados con la intervención en los centros educativos. Entonces van a empezar Juan Gregorio y Luismi de la Universidad de Castilla-La Mancha. Haremos un turno intervendrán ellos, haremos un turno de debate y luego posteriormente Catrien y Javi y volvemos a repetir el mismo modelo. ¿De acuerdo? ¿Vale? Espero que sea productivo para ustedes y vamos a ello. ¿De acuerdo? Cuando queráis.
Okay. Thank you for the invitation. So I really would like to thank the colleagues of the University of Zaragoza for inviting me to present our work, and it's a real pleasure to be here. So, good morning everyone. My name is Katrien de Koker. I'm from the Ghent University, and I'm working at the Department of Movement and Sport Sciences. And we are in the research group of sports pedagogy. And I hope you don't mind that I speak in English because my Spanish is non-existing. And I hope this first word is correct. So together with Leen Harens, we do research on how to improve physical education and sports participation. And we call ourselves the MOVES team, so that stands for Motivation in Education and Sport. So if you ever are in Belgium and you would like to visit our city, so the city of Ghent, you are more than welcome. Apparently we have good chocolate and good beer, so if you ever are in the neighborhood, you are welcome to visit us. So I will mainly present some work on how we measure and try to improve the interaction style of PE teachers. And I will shortly give an introduction on the theoretical framework that we use, and then continue with those 2 parts. So we start from the self-determination theory. So that's a theory on motivation and well-being that is being used in several life domains. So it's being used in the health context, in education in general, sport, and we use it specifically in physical education. So one of the concepts that is typical for self-determination theory, or SDT, is that there are different types of motivation. And most of you will know the difference between extrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation. So intrinsic motivation is when you do something because of the activity itself, you like it, it's enjoyable, you have fun doing it. While extrinsic motivation means that you do something related to an external factor, not the activity itself. And it can be because you are obliged, someone is pressuring you to do something, or you pressure yourself, you feel that you have to do it. Or it can also be because you think that the activity is important to do so, or you are interested in the activity. So these are different types of motivation. And what is unique in SDT is that they make a distinction between controlled motivation and autonomous motivation. So controlled motivation means that it's because of a pressure. You have the feeling you must do an activity, you have to, because of someone else or because of you feel it internally. And autonomous motivation is because you want to do an activity. You know it's important, you are interested, or you just like the activity. And then on the other side, there's amotivation, so that means that there's a lack of motivation. You wonder, why am I here? I don't like that activity at all. So why is this distinction important? We see that autonomous motivation is linked to positive outcomes. So, for example, better cognition, better affect, better behaviors. And controlled motivation is linked to more negative or maladaptive outcomes, so boredom, etc., anxiety, and so on. So that's why this difference is important. So it means that for our students, we want them to be autonomously motivated. And from the SDT, we know that the basic psychological needs are important in terms of the type of motivation. So we know that if the need for autonomy, relatedness, and competence is being satisfied, then the motivation will be autonomous. When these needs are frustrated, then a student will have the feeling that they must do something and that the controlled motivation is high. So because the needs can be supported or thwarted by other people, and in this case in PE by the PE teacher, it's important to have a look at the interaction style of the teacher, because it is linked to the needs of the student, and then also to the motivation, and then also to the behavior and the feelings and so on. So we know that motivating behaviors consist of being autonomy supportive, relatedness supportive, and structuring, while on the other hand, the needs are being frustrated or thwarted or undermined when the teacher is controlling, cold, or chaotic. So, and that's why we focus on the importance or the role of the teacher within PE. In last years, there have some recent insights on how we can approach those styles, and a recent novelty is the Circumplex approach to have a look at motivating and demotivating interactions of teachers. So that's a Circumplex model, a circular model that consists of two main dimensions. And on the horizontal axis, we have the need supportive styles, so they support autonomy, competence, and relatedness. And on the other hand, we have the need thwarting styles, so they are the demotivating styles. The other axis is the level of directiveness. So at the bottom, you have highly directive types of interactions, so that means that a lot of the decisions are being made by the teacher themselves. While at the top, we have low directiveness. That means that a lot of input from the students is allowed and the teacher is not deciding everything. So the combination of those two dimensions give 4 different quadrants. And that means that we have the four main styles being presented in the circular structure. So at the right top, we have autonomy support, then we have structure, control, and then also chaos. So you see that everything on the right is motivating and that the styles on the left are demotivating. And another specialty is that we can also have more fine-grained approaches within this model. And you see that each style is being divided in 2 sub-areas. So for instance, for autonomy support, we see that the most need supporting style is the attuning approach, while still need supportive, but a little bit less directive is the participative approach. So that means that the teacher is allowing a lot of input from the student. He is also providing choice to the student. The characteristic of the attuning approach is that it's nurturing the interest of the students and that the teacher is giving a good rationale for why we are doing certain activities. Then for the structure, we have the guiding and the clarifying approach. So for guiding, that means that there is giving a lot of help, a lot of feedback is being given. And for clarifying, it means that an overview is being given with what do we expect from the students and so on. For control, the less negative, but it still needs thwarting, is the demanding approach. So that means that the teacher wants a lot of discipline and is using commanding language. And on the most need-thwarting side, so the most negative one, is domineering. So that means that guilt and shame are being induced and that sometimes a student is being personally attacked by the teacher. And then for the chaotic approach style, we have the abandoning approach. That means that the teacher is giving up on the students. Or a waiting approach, that means that the teacher is not planning a lot and he has a rather laissez-faire attitude towards the students. So important to know is that a teacher can have a combination of all those styles. Normally, it's not that the teacher is only autonomy supportive, but it's a combination of all the different approaches together. And what is interesting to see is that autonomy support is not the complete opposite of control. Even if a teacher is, for example, not being autonomy supportive, that doesn't mean that he is controlling the whole time. So that's also something new. And then another advantage is that you can see what the pitfall is of one certain behavior. So, for example, we know that being participative is motivating, so it's good. But when you are maybe too participative or extremely low in directiveness, it becomes awaiting. So here you can also clearly see how the different approaches are against each other. So this is a bit of a background to know. So we use this approach a lot in our research and also to measure the teaching style. We start from this Circumplex model. So first a bit of how we measure the styles in our research, and we start from the SIS instruments, so that means situation in school instruments. So those are questionnaires that can be completed by the teacher or the student to get an overview of how those different styles are being provided by the teacher. It started from an instrument that was being used in a general educational context, so not in PE. But that type of questionnaire then had been adapted for the sports sector, also for higher education, and then also eventually, especially for PE. So a lot of research has already been done with this instrument. So how does the instrument look like? It's a vignette-based instrument, so it means that different situations that can occur within the classroom are being described. For example, one situation is it is time for students to practice, to do a specific exercise, and then 4 different reactions are being provided. So one reaction could be that the teacher is suggesting different levels of difficulty and asking the student what level they would like to practice. And that's an example of an autonomy supportive way to react. A controlling way to react is that the teacher says it's time to work, whether you like it or not. Sometimes you have to do things against your will, so that's demotivating. Or the teacher can be chaotic, he doesn't plan too much and see how things will develop. Or he can be structuring and set out a step-by-step plan to see how the progress can be best facilitated for the student. So for all of those 12 situations, the teacher or the student rates what reaction is best describing the teacher. So all reactions need to be rated from 1 to 0, and then in the end we get a nice overview of all the 4 interaction styles from the perspective of the teacher himself or from the perspective of the student. So we know that self-reports are very useful, so the survey methods are being used a lot. However, it's sometimes the possibility that people answer in a certain way because they think it is better to answer in that way, so they give social desirable answers. And it also is quite of a burden for the participants to complete this list. So an alternative is to use an observation tool. So that means that when we have video recordings of a class, an external rater can then observe the class and see how the interaction style of the teacher is. So it has some benefits. Of course, it's also not the perfect solution to everything, but it's very ecologically valid. It's like how it was in the class. The recording is there. It is a bit more objective, but still it's an external rater with his own perspectives that is rating the behaviors. And when you use this, you can easily compare an external rating to the self-reports of students or to the self-reports of teachers, so you have this more multi-informant perspective. And that was the plan when we developed and validated the SysPE coder. So that's specifically the observation instrument to assess the interaction styles of the teachers. And here I need to acknowledge the work of one of our PhD students. She actually already defended her PhD last year. So this is the work of Nele van Doorn, and she has 2 publications, one on the development of the tool, and then a second one is in another study also using the tool and seeing how the observed styles are being linked to student motivation. So I will now briefly explain a little bit how the instrument looks like. So it starts from the different approaches. So we have participative, attuning, guiding, clarifying. So it's a really long list, eventually, of 48 items. And for each of those approaches, different behaviors are being reported. So, for example, here for the participative approach, the teacher is giving options, is allowing input, is asking questions. So those are behaviors linked to the specific approach. And in all the cases, the STEM is starting from, if you were a student in the class, would you feel that the teacher is doing, and then you have the explanation of the behavior. So this is the part that needs to be completed by the rater, and he needs to do this every 5 minutes. So for every 5 minutes, he needs to provide a score for all those behaviors. And to help the rater, in the next column, there is some guidance on what scores to give. So 0 means that the behavior is not being shown. 3 is that the behavior is being shown, but not in a very neat supportive way. 6 is the behavior is being shown and it's very neat supportive. So in the end, you get different scores, and then in the next column, there's also an example of what the coding means. So this is an example of a completed or a part of a completed questionnaire. So for every 5 minutes, you get a score, and then you can get a sum of all the behaviors, but then also a sum of all the approaches, and then eventually a sum of all the 4 main styles. And then, so we came up with those items, but we wanted to check, does it apply to the Circumplex model? And with multidimensional scaling, you see all the different dots that could be combined, being positioned in the Circumplex. And then also based on this observation instrument, we see that you have the 2 dimensions going from need thwarting to need supportive, highly directive to low directive, and all the dots are quite good positioned to say that we have this circular approach. So this is, for example, one of the items. And then in the next phase, we also wanted to check whether if an observer, an external person, is assessing the behavior through this instrument, does it relate to student motivation? And there we see that not all the approaches linked very well with student motivation, but in the expected direction, we see that a tuning is linked to intrinsic motivation in a positive way, and that when the teacher is being demanding or abandoning, that leads to less intrinsic motivation, so what we would expect. And then we also did see a link, a positive link between demanding and introjected regulation. So it is useful to use this tool to look at those associations. So this tool is a valuable alternative to assess the interaction style of teachers. It aligns well with the self-reported CISPE questionnaires, and it's an advantage that separate behaviors can be assessed, and that we have 5-minute intervals. So that means that we, or if someone is interested in temporal analysis, you can see how a certain approach is evolving throughout a lesson. So we think it is useful to use this in future research, but we also think that it has practical implications, because a teacher, when he has the recording of a class, can complete this instrument to self-reflect on how he or she is doing in interactions with students. And it might also be useful as a feedback tool. So in teacher trainings or in teacher education, a mentor can watch a teacher how he is doing, and then at the same time complete this instrument to give more feedback regarding the motivational aspects of his behavior. So then I come to the next part, and that is focusing a line of research on how we can improve the interaction style of the teachers. So here I will present some work on our intervention research, and that is focusing on online video annotation. So you might wonder, there are existing interventions that focus on how we can improve teachers' interaction style. So you might wonder, why do we need more? When we look at the literature, we see that those interventions mainly focus on one style, and that's autonomy support. That's being studied the most, but we see that there's less interventional research on how you can improve structure as well, or the combination of the tools, of the styles. Most of the interventions are in person, so that means that the teacher goes to a facility, they have a workshop, they have group discussions, Maybe they practice some micro-teaching with each other, but it's also always in person and someone needs time to go to a facility. We see also that there are no authentic classroom situations, so it's mainly based on hypothetical situations and not based on real classroom situations. And the feedback or the advice that is being given is mostly generic. So all the teachers get the same tips and tricks to improve their teaching. So we thought to counter those limitations, it might be good to offer online interventions, because then teachers can do it more flexibly, so they can choose when they have time to go through the intervention. They don't need to go to somewhere else. And it's also possible to give more personalized feedback in those more tailored interventions, let's say. And if you include classroom recordings, then you also are able to facilitate authentic reflection on real classroom situations. So that brings me to the fact that classroom videos can be very important, and that's also being confirmed in previous studies. So in previous interventions, the videos have been analyzed and discussed with experts. We see that they stimulate self-reflection, but sometimes it is not clear for a teacher where to look for when watching a video. There's so much going on, and sometimes there's no focus on where to actually look for. And that's why we thought video annotation can be a solution for those weaknesses. So also so that means that you watch a video, you get specific instructions to look for specific situations, and when you see those, you add a little note on the video itself. So we really ask or give direction on where the attention should be going when watching the video. And that type of research has been used in the past. We know that it stimulates self-reflection, but it has not been used for SDT-based research studies. So we thought, let's combine all this, use video annotation for an online intervention where we want to focus on improving the motivating and demotivating style of the teacher. And that's when we developed the online video annotation tool, and we call it the V Observer, because V stands for video, observing your video. And it contains 4 main components. So I will explain the 4 components here. So in the first step, when teachers go to the tool, they are asked to complete the CIS-PE questionnaire, so the previous instrument with the 12 vignettes. And when they complete that, they automatically get a personalized profile. So this is an example of one teacher. You see that he is mainly tuning and guiding, a little bit less participative, a little bit less clarifying. And what we often see is that teachers have the impression that they are low on the demotivating style. So sometimes they tend to underestimate their own negative behavior. So we need to be aware of that. But based on this personalized profile, they can self-select a specific approach that they would like to focus on to improve. So for example, here clarifying was a bit lower compared to the others, so this teacher could select clarifying for the annotation. So in the next step, they get more information about that specific approach. So they make a selection for one of the approaches, and then they get a short knowledge clip, so a video clip with information on what that approach means, and then also some textual information to clarify what the approach is meaning. And then in the next step, they start to video annotate. So that means that they need a recording of their own class. So that's a bit, they need to prepare that beforehand. They then upload their own video, and then they can start annotating what they see. But we guide them through this annotation and explain that there are several annotation buttons. So you see them, they're circled in the green. And there's an explanation of the specific things that they should look for. So for example, this was the clarifying approach that the teacher was working on. And he selected a building block related to giving motivating feedback. So here the annotations are specifically linked to what that means. So it means that you give task-oriented feedback, person-oriented feedback, interpersonal feedback, corrective feedback, and hopefully not a lot of negative feedback. And through watching the video, they specifically look for those behaviors, and they can annotate it when they see this happening in their own video. There's also an option to create a new annotation. If they see something different that we did not predefine, they can also add it to the video. And then when they watched the whole lesson and did all those annotations, at the end they are also asked to self-reflect on that building block and then to make a short action plan. So here you see the questions that are related to the self-reflection, so they can answer it from 1 to 5. I give motivating feedback. I was using negative feedback, so it's a summary and a self-reflection based on how did I do. And then at the end, there's only 2 questions asking what would you like to change in the future and how would you do that specifically. So this was how the tool was built. And then in the first step, our research was focusing on how acceptable, usable, and feasible is this tool, because we think, it covers all the negative aspects of in-person trainings, but do teachers really like this type of intervention? And here the credits go to Arne Bouten. He completed his PhD and defended it in June, and one of his studies is already being published, so it's the first pilot testing related to acceptability, usability, and feasibility. So here the question was, do the teacher accept this type of tool, and do they think it is feasible to use? Because if they don't like it and they are not willing to use it, then the tool is not useful in practice. So we tested this in pre-service teachers, so they are future teachers going through teacher education, and they completed some questionnaires, and we had focus groups with them, and then also a small group of in-service teachers. We did some individual interviews with them. So they went through the tool, and everything that was going through their mind, they said it out loud. And then we had some follow-up interviews about how they liked the tool. So overall, they quite appreciated the tool. So we see that they think it's clear, it's user-friendly, it's feasible, it's innovative, useful, and interesting, but there were some concerns about the time feasibility. So we have to admit they first complete a whole questionnaire with 48 items. Then they need to upload their video and do the annotation, so it is quite time-consuming. But overall, we can conclude that the acceptability was moderate to high. They also mentioned a lot that it stimulates self-reflection, so that confirmed what the literature is showing. But there were some hesitations, mainly related to the time that is required. So it contains completing the questionnaire, annotating the video, and then there were sometimes also doubts regarding, can I film my class and how should I protect the data? And then we also saw that they had some difficulty with interpreting their personal profile by themselves. So in the next step, we added some more information on how they can use the profile and where to look for without the help of an external researcher. And then with that new version, we were able to do effectiveness studies. So these are also done by Arne. They have not been published yet, so I hope we can maybe next time show the reference to those papers. And we did 2 studies, so one with pre-service teachers. So we contacted 2 university colleges that offer initial teacher education in Flanders. And then we did a randomized clustered control trial with about 70 pre-service teachers. So all teachers completed the CIS-PE questionnaire before they got any intervention. And then the colleges were randomized in 2 groups. So, or you have the intervention group or the control group. And for both groups, there was 1 lesson on SDT, so the main principles of the self-determination theory regarding the needs of students, the motivation, and then their role to facilitate that. And only in the intervention group, students used the video annotation tool to self-reflect on their behaviors, and then afterward the CIS-PE questionnaire was completed again. And for the results, we see that pre-service teachers in the control group reported more attuning and more guiding, so that's better than was in the control group, and they also reported less abandoning behaviors compared to the control group. So we can say that it seems promising to use this video annotation tool in teacher education. However, we know that the sample was quite small. The results are based on self-reported data, so they can again overestimate the positive behaviors and underestimate the negative ones. And we only have the effects on 1 academic year, so we don't know if it would last over other academic years. And then finally, we also did an intervention study in-service teachers. So there we had contacts with several schools. Eventually about 50 secondary schools agreed to participate, and we also had a randomized clustered control trial. And here we have data from about 80 teachers and also data from their students. So there we have the multi-informant perspective, because we also had external ratings on the recordings of the class. So at baseline, we have teacher, student, and observation data. So all the classes were video recorded, and the teacher was wearing a microphone so that we could see and also hear what the teacher was saying. Then 1 group was giving the video annotation intervention, and in the other group, the control group, they only got a brief email with generic information about it is important to be motivating, but they did not do anything more. They did not complete the observation, the video annotation. And then afterwards, the same measures were being used at the post-test. For the result, so if we look at only the self-reported data from the teacher, we see that there was an intervention effect for autonomy support. So the yellow line shows that there's a slight increase in the level of autonomy support, while that remains the same in the control group. However, we did not see any effects on the self-reported structure, control, or chaos. When we use the external rating, we see the same, so that there's an intervention effect for autonomy support. So again, there's an increase and even a slight increase in the intervention group and even a slight decrease in the control group. But also here, no effects could be found for structure, control, and chaos. And then finally, for the student perceptions, we could not see any effects. So not for autonomy support, not for structure or control or chaos. So it might be that because of the short duration, students are not really able to detect differences in the way that teachers are in front of the class, and maybe they have a more general overview of how the teacher is being, and they don't really notice the differences. So yeah, more research is needed to see how we can change that. But overall, it seems promising to increase autonomy support. At least one motivating aspect was improving. However, there was no impact on the perception of the student, and that's maybe because the intensity of the training was fairly low. Teachers just do the video annotation once, and it might be that we need more expert feedback in addition to their self-reflection or peer feedback, or it might be that some offline strategies are also needed to have a bigger impact on the interaction styles. So I'm now at the end of my talk, and the two take-home messages would be that the CIS-PE Coder is a valuable instrument to assess PE teachers' observed motivating and demotivating style, and it relates well to the Circumplex model. And then secondly, the short video annotation tool that we developed seems promising to improve pre-service teachers' motivating style and to improve in-service teachers' autonomy support. So we will like to build on that later. And then I would like to thank you for your attention and thank the organizers again for having me here. Thank you.
Buenos días a todos y a todas presentes hoy aquí. En primer lugar, antes de comenzar con la presentación, me gustaría dar las gracias al grupo EFIPAF por organizar todo esto, también por pertenecer a él y por permitirme representarles hoy aquí, y especialmente por estar hoy aquí con Katrin. Thank you, Katrin, for coming. For me, it's an honor to be here with you. Esta explicación o la presentación de hoy intentaré hacerla en inglés, porque aparte de ser ponente, pues soy receptor. Por eso, por respeto a Katrin, pues intentaré hacerlo de la mejor manera posible. Como ella ya ha explicado y ha contextualizado lo que es el proceso motivacional y la importancia de los estilos motivacionales docentes, yo simplemente voy a completar, digamos, este proceso tratando de explicar 3 proyectos docentes o 3 tesis doctorales que han estado relacionadas con todo con esta laguna de la investigación. Entonces, comenzaré con la presentación en inglés, si os parece. As Katrin explained before, and mention the importance of the adoption of different demotivating teaching style in physical education classes for the developing of more quality of the motivational process of students. Previous studies have demonstrated the own importance of the motivational process of teachers themselves, not only for the developing of more quality of motivational process of teachers, but also because in the last few years, previous studies have demonstrated that there are a progressive decline in the motivational process of teachers and in their professional performance. So I think it's necessary to explain and centrate this explanation of it. To understand the complete sequence according to the self-determination theory, the central element of this theory is the teaching style used by physical education teachers, because influence in the adoption or more or less quality of motivational process of students, and in the adoption or more or less positive consequences within and outside physical education classes. But these consequences also affect in the own motivational process of physical education teachers, closing the circle, affecting again in the adoption of different teaching styles and in different work-related outcomes. As Catherine explained the Circumplex model, I am not going to explain it today. And I will try to explain different studies from 3 different doctoral theses. The first one was developed by Sergio Diloy from the student perspective. The other one from Carlos Mayo from the pre-service teachers, and myself from in-service teachers, okay? I will start with the variable-centered studies, later move on with the person-centered studies, and finally I will try to explain 2 training programs. The first one related to in-service teachers, and the second one more related to pre-service teachers. According to the variable-centered studies, in service teachers, we aim to identify different significant difference according to socio-demographic variables in terms of the adoption of different demotivating teaching style. For example, in terms of gender, we observe significant difference. Female physical education teachers report higher values in participative approach, whereas male physical education teachers report higher in demanding, domineering, and abandoning approaches. This can be explained, according to previous study, by social experience and gender-related expectations. Probably male physical education teachers need to display more hegemonic masculinity, appearing more stricter or tougher, whereas a female physical education teacher offer more choice and support the student interest and preference. Also, we observe a significant difference according to the educational level. For example, the primary physical education teachers report higher in both autonomy supportive teaching strategies, participative and attuning, whereas secondary physical education teachers report higher in both controlling and chaotic teaching approaches. This suggests that there are significant differences according to the stage. For example, and probably the secondary physical education teachers use more controlling teaching strategies in their classes, probably to maintain the order of the class due to the adolescence age in which their students are. But when these strategies don't work, because according to previous studies, they are not useful, probably they end up adopting more chaotic teaching approaches. For example, stop paying attention to their students, okay? The solution can be that physical education teachers, especially in this adolescent age, need to use more autonomy supportive and structuring teaching strategies, because this type of strategies maintain the order of the class, because maintain the high quality of motivation through our physical education. And finally, according to the years of teaching experience, we also found significant difference. In this case, The teachers with more years of teaching experience report higher values in both controlling and chaotic teaching approaches. This, according to previous studies, this can be explained by the fact that probably novice teachers invest more time to class preparation, using more recent methodologies more related to the student current needs. However, those physical education teachers who are more closely to the requirement probably use more outdated methodologies, less related to the student current needs. And the second aim of this study was to identify the pathway of the motivational process according to the pathway of the teachers, but using the 8 approaches of the Circumplex model. We observed that the need satisfaction positively predict the both autonomous motivation and controlled motivation, whereas need frustration positively predict the controlled motivation and also a motivation. In the second step, we observed that autonomous motivation positively predict the 4 motivating teaching approaches. The controlled motivation negatively predict participative and guiding, and positively demanding, domineering, and abandoning. And finally, the motivation positively predict the 4 demotivating teaching approaches. Most of the results are in line with self-determination theory principles, for example, the bright side and the dark side, but we found 2 interesting findings. The first one, the positive correlation from need satisfaction to controlled motivation. This can be explained by the fact that even when physical education teachers feel autonomous, competent, or connected to their work, probably they might still hold extrinsic motive to teach. For example, institutional pressure, work obligation, or external demands. Another interesting find is the negative correlation from controlled motivation to participative and guiding approaches. This suggests that when physical education teachers only have extrinsic motive to teach, for example, a stable salary or long vacations, probably they invest less time to class preparation, offering choice to their students or providing goal-oriented feedback, or adjusting the levels of the task to the students' abilities. In pre-service teachers, we also test to identify the motivational process, but in this time we separate the analysis according to the gender. In female pre-service teachers, we observe that competence satisfaction positively predict autonomous motivation and the 4 motivating teaching approaches. And competence frustration positively predict controlled motivation and both controlling approaches, and a motivation with a negative prediction to attuning and a positive prediction of the 4 demotivating teaching approaches. This model is very similar in male pre-service teachers, but it's slightly different because we add 2 more predictions. A negative prediction from a motivation to guiding and clarifying. This model is very similar compared to the in-service physical education teachers, so I am not going to explain too much today. And also we test to identify significant difference in this sample. We observe that boys, pre-service teachers, report higher values in competence satisfaction, but also in controlled motivation and a motivation, and demanding, domineering, and abandoning. Whereas girls, pre-service teachers, report higher values in both autonomy supportive teaching approaches. This suggests that even boys pre-service teachers, probably due to the hegemonic masculinity and the need to display more stricter and tougher from the society, did not prevent to use or to obtain more extrinsic motive to teach and to use more demotivating teaching approaches. And finally, according to the students, we also test to identify this motivational process, but in this time using the pathway of the students. In this case, we observe that the 4 motivating teaching approaches positively predict the need satisfaction, whereas the demanding is an interesting finding in this sample is that demanding positively predict the need satisfaction and negatively the need frustration. And finally, the rest of the approaches positively predict the need frustration. On the second step, we observe that need satisfaction positively predict the enjoyment and negatively the boredom, whereas the need frustration positively predict the boredom. Finally, enjoyment in a positive manner and boredom in a negative manner significantly predict the physical activity intention. An interesting finding, as I mentioned it before, is the positive correlation between demanding to need satisfaction in this sample. This suggests, and according to previous study, that probably for students, this type of strategies in a more collectivistic culture, such as Spain or China, compared to in more individualistic cultures, such as Belgium, for example, these type of strategies are normalized, and for this reason is not perceived as negative in more short term. However, when we test this, the effects of the demanding teaching forms in a more long term, in more longitudinal study, we have demonstrated that these type of strategies are purely negative. So we have to avoid this type of strategies. And are these teaching style and approaches unique to each physical education teacher, or can they be combined in practice? As Catherine mentioned it before, these teaching approaches are not unique, and can they be combined? For example, in physical education teachers, we observe 4 different teaching profiles. The first one is labeled motivating, which is characterized by high levels of need supportive teaching approaches and low levels of control. The second one is motivating the motivating, with high levels of all of types of motivation. Moderate profile with moderate levels of all of approaches. And finally, the motivating profile with low levels of need supportive and high levels of control. We also aim to identify significant difference according to the teaching profiles. In this case, we observed that the high levels of autonomous motivation were found in both first profile, motivating and motivating the motivating. Whereas the high levels of controlled motivation were found in the second profile, characterized by high levels of need supportive teaching approaches, but also in controlling approaches. Finally, the high levels of motivation were found in the last profile. Also, we test to identify significant difference according to work-related outcomes, job satisfaction, and professional performance. The best profiles in terms of these variables were found in the first profile, the motivating profile, and the low levels of these variables were found in the last profile. The interesting findings in this study, I think that although the similar levels of the autonomous motivation in both first profiles and develop the similar levels on the need supportive teaching approaches, the high levels of the controlled motivation and motivation in the second profile develop more levels of controlling teaching in this profile, and for this reason, this profile developed less positive work-related outcomes. In the case of pre-service teachers, we also test to identify teaching profile, but in this time, we also aim to identify a relationship between teaching profile and quality of motivation profile. First of all, we find 4 teaching profile, a purely need supportive profile, highly need supportive need controlling, moderate profile, and highly need working. If you observe, these teaching profile are very similar compared to the physical education teachers. And according to the quality of motivation through our teaching, we also observe 4 different teaching profiles. Good quality of motivation with high levels of autonomous and low levels of controlled motivation and motivation. High quantity of motivation with high quantity of all of types of motivation. Low quantity of motivation with low quantity of all of types of motivation, and poor quality of motivation with low quantity of autonomous and high quantity of controlled motivation. We found that purely need supportive profile show a strong correlation with good quality of motivation. The high need supportive need and controlling show a strong correlationship with high quantity of motivation. The moderate profile with low quantity of motivation. And finally, the highly networking profile with a poor quality of motivation. And in the case of students, we also test to identify this teaching profile, but in this time we separate the analysis according to low directiveness teaching style and high directiveness teaching styles. According to low directiveness teaching styles, we found 4 different teaching profiles. High autonomy support, low chaos, high autonomy support, very high chaos, moderate autonomy support, moderate chaos, and low autonomy support, high chaos. We also aimed to identify significant difference, and we found that the best profile in terms of the motivational process were identified as the high autonomy support, low chaos. And the worst profile were the low autonomy support, high chaos. Between the 2 intermediate profiles, we found an interesting finding in this case. This second profile, characterized by high levels of autonomy support and high levels of chaos, report higher values in basic psychological need satisfaction, but also in basic psychological need frustration. For this reason, we think that in a more long term, in a more longitudinal studies, probably this profile were worse compared to the third profile, because it's more stable. And according to the high directiveness teaching style, we also found 4 different profiles. High structure, high control, very high structure, very high control, moderate structure, moderate control, and low structure, low control. If you observe, all of profiles show similar levels of both teaching styles. This suggests that probably for students, structure and control goes hand to hand. We also test the significant difference, and we observed that the best profile was the very high structure, very high control, and the worst profile, the low structure, low control. This suggests that for students, according to the results observed in the structural equation model, for students, these type of strategies are not perceived as negative. However, the lack of structure and guidance for them is the most detrimental profile. Finally, we create 2 training programs to try to improve the teaching profile of physical education teachers and pre-service teachers. In the case of in-service teachers, we observe significant improvements. After the program, we observed that for students, the autonomy and competence satisfaction increase after the program, and also the physical activity intention outside the school context and the quality of the experience within physical education and also the learning per se. Whereas the autonomy and competence frustration decrease after the program. Also, for in-service physical education teachers, we observe significant improvements. In this case, we observe that the autonomy and competence satisfaction increase after the program, and also the professional performance perceived by themselves, whereas the autonomy frustration decrease after the program. These benefits can be explained by the change observed by students and teachers of the different teaching profile of the physical education teachers. For example, the students perceive their teacher as more need supportive, with more levels of participative, attuning, guiding, and clarifying, and less controlling, with less level of demanding and domineering. Also, teachers perceive themselves as more participative, less controlling, and less chaotic in terms of awaiting approach. Also, in the case of pre-service teachers, we observe improvements. In this case, we observe that the participative, guiding, and clarifying increase after the program, and demanding, domineering, and awaiting decrease after the program. But in this sample, we observe an interesting thing, is that when pre-service teachers have done the second measure after the training seasons and went to the real practice in a real school, in a real context, and try to apply this type of strategies, and come back to the university for the third semester of the program, they lost some of the improvements achieved in the second semester. Probably due to that the pre-service teachers need to have more time to change their teaching profile. Probably due to the real mentors in the school don't allow them to apply this type of strategies because they prefer use more traditional method to teach, or probably due to the students are not accustomed to receive this type of strategies, and for this reason pre-service return to the initial levels. Finally, to conclude with this presentation, I would like to explain why these benefits appear. I think, in my opinion, the most important thing is the specificity of the Circumplex model. We adapt the strategies from Ahmadi to the 8 specific teaching approaches of the Circumplex model, and this offers us the opportunity to specify the training for each specific needs of each specific teacher. Also, the use of a robust framework, such as SDT and self-determination theory, the use of a congruent style. If we want that physical education teachers use need-supportive teaching styles and avoid need-working teaching styles, we have to use them in the training. For example, to support the autonomy of the trainees, of the teachers, we allow them to choose different things in the lessons, such as the music. To support the competence, we use the interrogative feedback. Or to support their relatedness, we create a close relationship with them. Also, the importance, as I mentioned it before, the individualized training. We, especially in the last training seasons, we adapt the training, in fact, of the needs of each specific teacher. Also, the use of a personal videos. This strategy was categorized by physical education teacher as the most useful to change their perception. And finally, we give them a dossier with different motivational strategies to apply in different contexts in physical education. And also we use different strategies from other teaching training programs. The next step, as Catherine mentioned it before, is include an observational perspective, also globalize the training programs and evaluate their impacts in different contexts, and finally promote the knowledge achieved using different strategies. We want to create a podcast, online courses, and something like that. And finally, to close with the presentation, I only want to say 3 different key points. Firstly, the importance of the need to consider all of the factors that are important in the adoption of the motivational process of teachers and students. Each factor can influence the whole process, and for this reason it's important to consider all of the variables involved in. Also, the importance of consider different approaches to achieve the information. Today I presented different studies moving from variable-centered approach to person-centered approach, concluding with the presentation of 2 training programs. And finally, I only want to say that despite these significant advancements, much remains to be explored. Y permitirme que concluya en español, porque creo que a pesar de que nos digan muchas veces que todo está explorado y que todo está investigado y que no vamos a inventar nada nuevo, a mí me gustaría concluir diciendo que queda mucho todavía por hacer y que si el mundo está cambiando constantemente y las necesidades de los estudiantes están cambiando constantemente, nosotros tenemos que cambiar y adaptarnos con ello. Nada más. Muchas gracias.
Okay, hi Catherine, I'm Celia, welcome to ESCA. I have the research stay with you on April, nice to meet you. Thank you for the speech. I'm working my thesis with CSP Coder, okay? And in my first study, I have translated and validated the instrument to Spanish, okay? And I have 2 questions for you. First, I think that 5 minutes intervals are so hard to assess. And are you thinking in another possibility more comfortable to use this instrument?
Thank you for your question. It's indeed interesting. We choose a 5 minutes interval because in the past 3 minutes have been used, but that's even more burdensome to complete, and also 10 minutes, but then we saw that you lose some information. So it appears that 5 minutes is best to get the most optimal results, but it does imply that you need time and it takes longer to complete the rating. That's true.
Okay, thank you. And second, in Belgium, is it difficult for you to get teachers who agree to be recorded?
Is it difficult to get teachers who are?
Who agree to be recorded? Video.
Yeah, okay. It is, in the beginning, sometimes it was difficult because, for example, we have a national training day for teachers with different topics. So they can get a training on how to implement soccer and all kinds of topics, and we included one topic on motivating teaching, and none of them subscribed. So we really need to find a way of how we can increase the interest and willingness of the teachers to participate. This year we have the same training day, and at least 25 teachers did subscribe. So if we keep on talking about it, then hopefully they are more willing to participate, but it can be a struggle. And we also see that sometimes it helps when the school leader is also stimulating them to participate, and that's why we often go through schools and involve the school leader so that he can not force the teachers but ask and stimulate them to participate. Yeah, thank you.
Gracias.